One of the most common questions I get about OT and ICS cybersecurity is which certification should I take? Whether it's about getting a job, whether it's about proving my skills or knowledge. Idea is that folks from both IT and OT always have these questions around certifications. Now, if you come from the IT or IT cybersecurity world, you're very familiar with the idea of using certifications not only to increase your knowledge, but prove your skills, prove your passion for a subject. And that can go a long way with hiring managers. So, a big part of getting certified is to help you get a job, right? Get that foot in the door, especially if you don't have actual real world experience. Certifications don't necessarily work that way in the OT world because people in OT or engineering or automation, right, they're already working in that field. And when they're asking about cybersecurity certifications, sometimes it's about improving knowledge, right, growing knowledge or demonstrating passion. A lot of times they're actually being asked by their company, right, by their managers to get certified because that shows them really is marketable to clients. And a lot of times when you get certified, maybe it's actually a client request, right? We want your employees to have maybe a 62443 or a SANS certification before they work on our particular project. And you do see that a lot. So there's a lot of folks in the OT world and OT cybersecurity already doing the job, not certified. But then they go back to get the certifications to prove they have the skills and they have that knowledge to clients because of a requirement. But it doesn't matter which world you're coming from, right? Up until now, we've had two paths to get certified in OT and ICS cybersecurity. We had the SANS route, and then we had the ISA IEC 62443 route. And we're going to talk about all of these in detail. Now we just saw a third with CompTIA's SecOT Plus, which acts as a great entry point for folks that really are just wanting to get started in the field and don't have a lot of resources to spend, right? To go down the 62443 or the SANS route, because those get a lot more expensive. Right? But again, it's one of the most common questions I get. So I put a guide together, and you can find it on my website. So, because this is one of the more popular questions I get, I actually put together a ultimate guide to the certification pass that we have in OT ICS cybersecurity, which you can find on my website at mikeholcomb.com. If you go to the website, you will go under resources and go to OT ICS infographics. If you click there, you'll actually see all of the different infographics that I've created for LinkedIn over time, and you can see there's just a few, right? But if you keep scrolling, and near the bottom, you can see there's the ultimate OT cybersecurity certification path for 2026. This is what we're going to talk about for the rest of this video. So I downloaded a copy so we can zoom in and look at it a little bit more in detail. But essentially, the path is broken up into the top half and the bottom half. And you can see here in the middle where we have the SecOT Plus certification. So if we look at the top and we look at where we're starting, again, whether you're a complete beginner, right, meaning you don't have any knowledge of IT cybersecurity, or even if you're coming from an engineering or OT background, as long as you don't have an IT cybersecurity background, you're going to want to start with the networking fundamentals. So a lot of times I suggest people start studying towards and use the content that was made for the Network Plus certification exam from CompTIA. It's a great place to start to learn the fundamentals of how different systems come together and communicate, especially over a TCP IP network, which is what we see everywhere now in OT and ICS. And that's not something that a lot of engineers and OT operators have had to do until today. So a lot of OT folks don't know networking and TCP/IP, and that's okay. But you want to master those fundamentals before taking the next step. Because remember that attackers, they're coming in over the network. We want to understand how the networking works to be able to better protect against these attacks. Now, once you have the networking fundamentals in place, then it's important to understand the basics of IT cybersecurity. Now, some people in the engineering world tell you that IT and OT cybersecurity are nothing alike, which is completely false. The idea is that they have a lot more in common than they don't. It's just important to understand and learn, right, where they're different and how they're different. If you don't learn where and how they're different, you're going to end up potentially getting someone hurt or killed or bringing down the plant. And I've seen too many plants come down because somebody wasn't aware of the differences. So you need to understand how IT cybersecurity works. So then we can start to then look at how OT cybersecurity works. And so that leads into the SecOT plus. So CompTIA has just released SecOT plus as their entry level OT cybersecurity certification. So how does cybersecurity work in a power plant or a water treatment facility or a manufacturing site or a mine or a subway or right, the list goes on and on. But you can see again from the first half, if you already have an IT cybersecurity program background, right, and you're familiar with networking and IT cybersecurity fundamentals, then I would say you're ready to jump into SecOT plus, start understanding, learning about OT and ICS cybersecurity. And I have tons of videos and full courses that you can watch on my YouTube channel, right, where you're watching this video. But if you're coming as a complete beginner, right, or if you're coming from an OT background, maybe you're an engineer or you're a PLC tech, and you don't have that networking or that IT cybersecurity background, that's okay. It just wasn't part of your world or part of your job before. So you want to go ahead and work towards network plus, security plus, and then the basics of OT cybersecurity with SecOT plus. Now you can study and get the knowledge and you don't have to actually go take a certification exam, but I always say that, it's better to have certifications than not. And if you're putting in all the time and effort to study, right, and learn, it's like go get the certification, right? Maybe if you lose your job tomorrow, right, would you rather have the certification or not? That's how I always approach it. And I would much rather have the certification if I was looking for a job tomorrow. Again, SecOT Plus, which was created by CompTIA, right, is very cost effective, right? And it's that entry level cert. So it's great for people that are coming from IT or IT cybersecurity that want to start to get into the OT cyber world. Maybe even just to determine, hey, is this something I want to do? Because it's not for everybody. But you don't have to waste a ton of money or time going down some of these other paths, which cost a lot of money. SecOT Plus, you can study with some free resources if you wanted to. And then I believe the exam's around 400 and some odd dollars. If you go further than that, this is where we get into the two original paths. So you can see here, once you have the basic OT ICS cybersecurity knowledge with SecOT Plus, then you're ready for one of the other paths or both. I've done both of these, right? And I've been very fortunate to work for a company that actually paid for me to go to these courses. They spent a lot of money. And I was very lucky, very fortunate. I don't take that lightly. That's a big part of why I create content on LinkedIn and YouTube to share. But there's two paths. I like to actually start with the SANS path. And you can see really the deciding factor between which path you're going to take is usually based off of the amount of budget that you have. Because SANS classes now cost about $11,000 to take the course and the certification exam. That's a lot of money, right? That most people on the planet will not be able to afford. They are some of the best classes you'll ever take, right? With some of the best instructors with real world experience. A lot of them are my friends, but the classes are very expensive. They're not going to argue that either. But if you're looking at the SANS world and you have those resources, you can start with the GICSP. So that's their entry level OT ICS cybersecurity certification, and like Security OT Plus on steroids. Right? The grid course is written by Rob Lee. Rob, who's the CEO and co-founder of Dragos, one of the larger OT ICS cybersecurity companies in the world. He's often thought of one of the world thought leaders in this space. And he also worked in the United States as both a defender and a red team operator for the United States government. He was an advanced persistent threat. He was a state adversary. But he wrote this class to take what can often be seen as a very complex, complicated subject and boil it down to where you understand after that class that defense in OT cybersecurity is actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. Right? It doesn't have to be complex or complicated, or as he says, defense is doable, which is why I love that course. So I always suggest if people have the money, that's the one class to take. And he also teaches it live once a year at the SANS ICS Summit, which is in Orlando, Florida, in the middle of summer. But again, to be able to take the class with one of the world thought leaders in the space and be in the room and be able to ask him questions, right, face to face, that's priceless. Now, if you work in power generation, and this is mostly for North America, so for power generation and power transmission entities, they fall under what we call NERC-CIP regulations. So United States, Canada, parts of Mexico. If you're part of the U.S. power grid, then you fall under NERC-CIP regulation. So Tim Conway, who's one of the, again, world thought leaders in the energy space, he wrote this course to help people understand how to ensure their environments are NERC-CIP compliant. So that is one class, not for everybody. But if you work in power in North America, it's a great course to take. And it's another one, take it with Tim if you get the chance. They do have an advanced defense course, but it doesn't have a certification that goes with it. So it's not why we mentioned here. And then probably about another year, they're going to have a certification around OT ICS penetration testing. So they just released that class last year, but it takes about 2 years for them to get to the point where they can actually then launch the certification exam. So they have to be teaching for 2 years before they can launch that. And so keep an eye out for that, but that's going to be probably mid 2027 or a little bit later before that happens. But that's the SANS route. Again, love the courses, love all the instructors, right? A lot of incredible content. But again, it's just very expensive for a lot of people. So the alternate is the 62443 path, which still requires an investment. And if you're not familiar with 62443, 62443 comes from an American organization called ISA and a European organization called IEC. That's where those come from. But 62443 is considered the gold standard or standards that tell us how to build a successful cybersecurity program for securing our OT and ICS environments. And so ISA, which started the standards, they actually created a set of courses and exams. Now, they make you take each course to take the exam. With SecOT Plus, with the SANS exams, you can just go take the exams. You don't have to take the course. With ISA, you have to take the course before you can take the exam. And depending on when you buy the the course, and if you get a little bit of a discount, right? They can still range from it's like $1,600 to $2,000 or so. The last time I saw. Now you can become an ISA member, which is I think about $160 a year, and then you get a substantial discount. But I think that's going down to about $1,600 for each course and exam, right? So if you're doing all four, right, that still adds up pretty quickly. But people like it because maybe they can, afford like one class every 6 months or a year or every other year, and so they can build them over time. Where again, they're going to be priced out of SANS, unfortunately. But 62443, they have their fundamental specialists, right? So they're entry level. This is what OT ICS cybersecurity is. There's a design specialist. So how do we design, right? Secure OT ICS networks. There's the risk assessment specialist. So how do we conduct risk assessments in OT and ICS environments? It's one of the key kind of foundational pillars in the 62443 world. Right, understanding the risk that's there, and then what can we do to lower or maybe potentially eliminate that risk? But usually it's lower the risk to where it's an acceptable level for the organization. And then there's a maintenance special, which is kind of everything else, right? It's like a big bucket for everything else they didn't get to in the first three courses that they want to talk about around OT and ICS cybersecurity. So a lot of vulnerability management and penetration testing in that course. That's definitely what I remember from that one. It is kind of cool that if you pass all four courses or exams, they give you a fifth certification called the cybersecurity expert. So I love the idea that they give you this kind of additional designation for taking all of the certification exams and passing. I just don't like the title because you're not going to be an expert in anything by taking a couple of classes, right, and taking some exams. And these aren't necessarily the hardest exams to take, right? So I wish they changed the name. Other than that, I think it's a good series for people that need to get certified. When I went and got my certification, I had all the SANS certifications already, but it was a client requirement. I was working on a project for Shell, and Shell wanted to make sure that we had those certifications. So I went and took the cloud courses and took the exams and got certified. So that's the ultimate OT cybersecurity certification path for 2026. And it's probably not going to change that much over the next couple of years. But again, it's designed to look at where you're starting from, right? If you come from an IT cybersecurity background like I did, right? Yeah, I can just, if I was starting today, I could just jump to SecOT Plus, right? Start learning about OT, ICS, cybersecurity. Again, check out the full courses I have on my channel to learn about OT, ICS, cybersecurity. If you're coming from an OT or ICS background as an engineer or a PLC tech, or maybe you do, you're in operations and maintenance work, right? Or maybe you're completely new to all of this. You're going to want to master the networking fundamentals and the IT cybersecurity fundamentals first, and then jump into SecOT Plus. And then at that point, right, you're good to maybe start working in the field, get some experience. And then if you need more knowledge, you can keep studying. Remember, you can keep learning, right? Again, use my channel and all the other resources that I talk about and share. You don't have to necessarily go out and get certified. But sure, certifications can help you get jobs in certain organizations. And then again, you might start working for an organization and then they're going to require you to get a certification. The nice thing is that they're going to require you to get the certification. They're going to pay for it if you're already working there. So always try to get that job first and then work for an organization that'll send you to class and help you get certified. But I hope this helps. Again, it's one of the most commonly asked questions I get. So again, I put this together. Hopefully it helps. But if you have questions, let me know. Drop them in the comments and I'll be sure to reply.